Hey guys, in this video I'm going to talk a bit about a mixing concept that's really important if you want to get consistently good mixes. And I'm going to talk about a lot of reasons why your mix could kind of fall apart or not sound good at the end of it. So I'm going to do a couple A/B tests with you just to see what you think, and think in your head whether you think one sounds better or worse before and after. So I'll just say before, I'll play some, and then after. All right, so before. Before. After. All right, before. After. Before, after. So before, after. Before, after. All right, which one do you think sounds better? Here's some compression. Before, after. Before, after. All right. Next, let's check out some saturation. Before, after. Before, after. Okay, so the point of this is that typically the louder signal is going to sound better regardless of what's going on with the processing, because as you turn the volume up, you get the impression of more dynamics. All right. So let me share with you what I do to make sure that the levels are balanced, all right? Now I'm going to do this to individual effects because this is going to make it easier for each separate effect, all right? So right now I've got an EQ. Now if we come over here, this is Voxengo span. Let me look it up here so you can see. If you come over here, span. As you can see, this is Voxengo, and it's free. So I recommend that you download this if you want to do the same thing. But this is where I check my peak levels and my average levels, okay? So I'm just going to hit reset here. And we'll do before. All right, so we're at -3 dB at the peak. When we turn this on, we're now at -1.1, so that's like 1.8 dB of gain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over, in this case, add a utility because we can't turn the volume down on the effect itself. So I just grouped this together here. So I've got the utility. So I can turn this on and now hit reset. And now as you can see, the peak is the same as it was before. So before, after. And the volume change might seem deceiving, so what I will do is I'll literally adjust this. I think the easiest way to do this is if we start here with the utility, what I'll usually do is I'll turn it down more than it needs to be, because this tool It doesn't tell us if we go quieter, but it will tell us if we go louder. It's always going to tell us the peak volume. So I like to start lower and slowly bring my way up. So, and I just hold the shift key so I can do this slowly. And just aiming for that -3. Getting close. A little too much. So now I got to hit reset again. All right, so I'm almost there. All right, great. That's close enough. And we're at -3.0. So that's how I would adjust the sound. That way I know for sure that the EQ is actually helping the sound. Right? It's not that the sound is bad, it's just that you don't want to be tricking your brain into thinking that volume is actually the effect. And if we come over to the OTT, I've done the same thing here. I adjusted the output volume in the same way. So now, before and after. Right? And you can decide obviously what you think sounds better, but at least things are balanced. Now another thing that I will do here is I will set the limiter so that we're at a set volume. So right now, you'll notice that it's not compressing or limiting anything here. But if I turn something on that is not adjusted, like let's say this compressor, as you can see, it's pushing that down, right? So we know that this is actually turning the volume up, which we don't want. So that will let us know, okay, whatever we're doing is affecting the volume level. So then we can adjust the volume so that this no longer is limiting the sound. All right, so that's just a good way to check if your volumes are correct or not. So yeah, here's the compressor on. And obviously it sounds better because it's a couple dB louder. But this is the more accurate way to judge. I adjusted the volume and right. And you do want to keep an eye on the RMS, because compression is obviously going to shift the sound. But for the most part, if you just dial in the peak volume, you're going to be in much better shape than you would have if you hadn't adjusted that. And what you might want to do is when you have a setting that you like, for example, you might want to save it as a default. That way you've got volume adjusted for your effects, so you don't really need to do this as much when you're using a certain effect. All right. Obviously with compression, the more you change the ratio and attack and all that stuff, the more the volume is going to change. So it might be a little tricky to do. But for other effects, having the volume adjusted can be a real time saver. Over here, we had the saturator, and it's got no drive added or anything, but if we come here, we'll hit reset one more time, and we're back at -3 dB. Turn on the saturator. And as you can see, it's a little bit louder here. Reset. So I'll come over and I will just adjust the output. And here you can see that the peak level is staying the same, even though I think that the RMS is a little bit louder. But overall, you're going to get a better response. So the next thing that I would recommend, let me just make these a little bit smaller. Next thing I would recommend is listening to your mix at the same volume. And a great way to do that is you can get an app on your phone. So I have an app called dB or decibel, right? And it'll tell me the level. Now these aren't super accurate, but they're consistent. So even if they're off by a couple dB, they'll consistently be off. So you can kind of adjust the taste. But that way you can kind of pick a level and then keep your volume level in the studio at that level when you're mixing. Because here's the thing, as you bring the volume up, your ears actually adjust the EQ. So as we get louder, it actually enhances the lows and the highs a little bit to the degree of volume. That's why a lot of times things sound better, because the ear is compressing the sound. And that's also why one day you could be working on a mix and it sounds great to you. You come back the next day and it sounds like garbage. Usually one of the factors is that you're listening to it at a different volume than you were before. And oftentimes you're listening to it louder than you normally should be the day before, because your ears are adjusting to the volume level or EQs. You may notice after a few hours of mixing that you start wanting to boost EQs a little bit because things aren't sounding very bright. The fact of the matter is that things are typically bright enough, but that brightness is dulled down because the brain is actually like attenuating those certain frequencies, trying to balance things out, right? So over a long period of mixing without a break, your ears are going to be fatigued and your mix is going to sound more dull than it did before. So you'll do things to brighten it up. You come back the next day when your ears have adjusted and you'll hear all that tinniness and overuse of EQ, and your mix will once again sound not very good at all. So one way that I kind of get around this, because this is going to happen to everyone even when we are aware of it, is what I'll do is when I've been mixing for a couple of hours, when I'm making adjustments, what I'll typically do is I'll come in and if I'm going to EQ something, I'll just drag in another EQ and make my adjustments or whatever, right? Instead of going back to my original EQ and changing that. That way, if I come back to the mix the next day and I don't like what I've done, all I got to do is just turn this off, compare the difference, and we're back to where we were before I started over messing with it, right? I'll do the same thing with volume by dragging in utility. I'll just pop that, at the end, and I'll make my adjustments. If I come back the next day and it's not working, I know exactly what I did and I can just remove those and I'm back to where I was without having to spend too much time trying to figure out how to reverse engineer what I just did. So those are some techniques that I recommend you try out with your mixing. That way you know what every process is doing to your sound because of the volume leveling. So once again, adjust the volume level so that you are at the same peak level, and then make sure that your RMS levels aren't wildly off. Otherwise you may need to lower volumes even more. Download this Span by Voxengo. This is a great free plugin, and I just put it at the end of my tracks, and that way I can check levels. And then the trick here with adding a limiter and just adjusting the ceiling, you just keep on adjusting it until you start seeing it bump, and then you bring it up a little bit higher by a tenth of a dB at a time. And then that way, if you turn on an effect and you see this starting to bump, you know that that the effect is also bringing the volume up. So you may want to adjust that volume so you get a better idea of how things are really affecting the sound. So there you go, guys. I think that'll improve your mixes quite a bit. Feel free to drop any of your own tips below and let me know if you got any other questions, and I'll think about bringing it up in another video. Take care. Have a good one.